Hello and welcome to our 2018 November edition of Tree Talk. Today we're going to talk about mast, which is really food for wildlife that is produced by trees. So we're talking about fruits and nuts.
Hello everyone, welcome to Tree Talk. Duane Rigsby, Dave Apsley. Dave, we're getting around fall time and it's about time to feed some wildlife. How do we go about, or what's these trees that we're talking about? What's the word mast?
So mast is really any kind of fruit or nut that is produced by a tree that wildlife eat.
Okay.
So you've got mast.
So what
right
I have, yeah, I have mast right here. I have nuts, Buckeye nuts. Is this correct? Or?
Those are Buckeyes.
Okay. Now tell me, Dave. There's a lot of people that might misconceive Buckeyes or chestnuts.
Okay.
Tell me, what's the difference?
Chestnut is a native tree that's pretty much gone from our ecosystem because of a disease. But if you can zoom into what's in front of me, I didn't find a chestnut because they're hard to find. But chestnut fruits do look similar to the Buckeye fruit, but they're going to have a real spiny husk on them. You can barely touch them.
Get a hold of them. They got real
painful.
Sharp things, yeah.
So in Ohio, we have two kinds of Buckeyes. And probably what confuses some people, they're in the horse chestnut family, so that's just more complication.
Yeah.
But these are Ohio Buckeyes here. They're really dark colored, and if you look at their husk, they're really kind of bumpy and spiny, where this one is our yellow Buckeye, which is usually a much larger fruit. They tend to be a little bit more brown in color, and they're going to have a smooth husk on them. These are very common in the southern part of the state. Yeah. These are probably more common up in the flatter parts of the state, but you'll find them down here in southern Ohio, down along the stream bottoms and down around the river bottoms. So the Ohio Buckeye, and I hear it's really bad luck if your necklaces are made of yellow Buckeye. So you got to make sure you get the Ohio Buckeye fruit.
Got to make sure the Ohio, yeah.
But yes, these are the Buckeyes, and I think the Buckeye's probably the only mascot named after a tree fruit that I can think of. Anyway.
That might be true, yeah, absolutely.
Unless somebody's named after an acorn, maybe.
Yeah. So now, Dave, the difference in the Buckeyes, I've heard, are they poisonous?
They are supposedly poisonous. I don't think there are many species of animals that can eat them other than rodents.
Really? Okay.
So I grew up squirrel hunting in the hills of southeast Indiana. Buckeye fruits are available pretty early in the fall. Yeah. But squirrels know how to navigate, and they don't eat the parts that are poisonous. At least that's what they say.
Okay. So where would a Buckeye tree grow? Is it a wet area, dry area? Where would we find them?
The Ohio Buckeye grows pretty much in floodplains, pretty moist sites, but not where they're standing in water. So it has to be a well-drained but a moist site. Okay. And they like a little bit of shade. So a lot of people want to plant Buckeye trees out in the full sun and a real dry site, and they're not going to do well there. So if you're going to plant a Buckeye tree, I highly recommend planting in a place where you got some partial shade, even if it's on the north side of the house maybe. You don't want to be directly under the shade of trees, but you don't want to be exposed to that full hot sun on a south dry slope.
All right. And now you had a question there that you get a lot. Can you start a tree with this, or what?
So yeah, this is these fruits are actually what are going to produce the next Buckeye tree. And I get that question every fall, is how do you grow a Buckeye? And a lot of people want to gather these fruits up, put them on a shelf or put them in an area and then plant them in the spring. And that's probably the biggest mistake you can make, because if you bring them inside and leave them inside too long, they're going to dry out.
Yeah, I was going to say, does that make them dry?
They get too low moisture content and they won't do well in the spring.
Okay.
So you really have a couple options. You want to collect them as soon as the husks start to split a little bit. You want to either keep them in a cool, moist place, so you could put those seeds in a bag with some sand or some peat moss with a little moisture and put them in the fridge.
Oh, okay.
And keep them for for the winter and plant them in the spring, or you can collect them and get them in the ground right away in the fall.
Okay, so you're just going to turn them right back around and plant them that fall.
You can plant them in the fall, and then you don't have to worry about the moisture, because that's what happens in nature.
Yeah.
The only problem with that, you can imagine what it might be.
Yeah. It may survive, it may not.
Well, squirrels.
And squirrels, yeah, you're right.
So
they may go dig them up.
Different critters might dig them up and eat them. So if you got a lot of squirrels in there, you may want to protect them some way. Put them in maybe put some screen over top or something to prevent that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really, they're not that hard to grow, and you can get pretty good success as long as you don't let them dry out too much.
Okay. Well, what's, besides a Buckeye, we're in Ohio here, what's the other popular tree nut that we have that is used for fruit?
So we've got, when we talk about wildlife and fruit for wildlife, we break it into two categories. We've got the fruits that are real soft and fleshy that don't survive very well through the winter months. They're very perishable. Think of your grapes and your apples and things like that.
Right.
And then we've got these nuts that store very well. So the group of things that are really hard and store well are what we call the hard mast.
Okay.
So things like acorns, things like buckeyes, things like walnuts and hickory nuts are hard mast. Hard mast is really critical in the winter months because the species of wildlife that live here year-round, you start thinking about, we get into February, there's not a lot of food
There's
available.
not much food there.
So these are the things that are critical to keep a lot of our game species, you know, like our deer and our turkey.
Yep.
So they have some food. Squirrels depend on them in the winter months. But the soft mast is gone. It's the things like the, I've got a few examples we'll show you a little bit later, but our cherries and our blackberries and things like persimmon even that are gone.
Okay.
It's important to have all those because wildlife eats year round and they need some variety in their diet just like we do.
Right.
But the real critical stuff is this hard mast. Things like the hickories, the walnuts, and the cherries. So we've talked quite a bit about our buckeyes already. I'll kind of move those out of the way.
Okay.
Next thing I want to talk about are acorns. And acorns are really critical. And lots of species of oaks out there. But you'll notice these guys. I don't know if you can see that on the camera. This one's probably a little easier to see. You see that little root coming out?
Yeah, like it's sprouting.
It's actually sprouting. That's a white oak. And the white oaks will sprout in the fall.
Okay.
So as soon as they hit the ground, they're going to start to grow.
They're going to start sprouting.
Where this is a red oak, it won't sprout until the spring. So these guys aren't as bitter.
Yeah.
The deer and turkey probably like them better in the fall. But these are a little bit more bitter, but they don't sprout until the spring.
So does the red ones, do they last longer then?
They do.
Because the other ones are already starting to sprout, I would assume, they wouldn't have them for food.
So things in that red oak group don't sprout as well. They don't taste as good, but they store very well.
They store very well.
So wildlife aren't any different than people. There's things they prefer that they're going to go after, and they're going to go after things in this white oak group, like our white oak. These are chestnut oaks, and there's a couple other species that we could talk about, but those are probably the most common.
Okay.
So which do you think's better for wildlife to have around?
Well, I would think it would. To me, I would think it would be a combination of them.
Exactly.
Because I would think they're going to be eaten at different stages, right?
Yeah, and the other thing is acorns aren't real consistent. This year seems to be a pretty good year for some and not for other, or for really, I'm finding some red oaks and some black oaks. But it's nice to have that variety out there for two reasons. One, you'll have food available a little bit earlier in the fall and winter if you got a lot of white oak. But if you've got the red oak, you've got that food available later in the winter. So, and then having that variety, you've got a better chance of having some being produced every year.
Now, Dave, is the cap, is it good for anything? Obviously, if there's nothing else for them to eat, they may munch on that, but I don't see many. I see these things laying everywhere.
No, I don't think they provide much value. Actually, for us as foresters, they're pretty valuable because that's how we identify our acorns in the cap. And you're holding this one by the little stalk. Things in that white oak group tend to have a little stalk like that. I was laughing before we got on the air whether I could use the word peduncle, which is the biologist or botany term for that stem or stalk. So lots of characteristics of that cap help help us identify our different oaks. And they're on the ground. They seem to hang around for a while. Like this big red oak here's got that little, looks like a artist cap or a little beret or beanie. Yeah. The white oaks have these bumpy, warty caps. Yeah. There's the chestnut oak caps, a little bit different, not quite as bumpy. So lots of good ID characteristics. The acorns are really a staple of food. I see a lot of deer hunters using corn and putting things out there to get the deer to come in, but if you know how to hunt and you got a good year where you got acorns on the ground,
where you know where they're at,
find those white oaks and start hunting under those, and you're going to find you're going to have the deer coming into those.
Yeah, that's deer, squirrels, like you said. Now, do they fall at a different time? Yeah. Versus the white versus the red?
They're both hitting the ground now. I think there's a lot of variables in that, but it really comes down to how mature they are. Yeah. Some will come down a little earlier than others, but most of it's going to hit the ground. It varies so much. This year's been so wet, but I think that extra moisture has been really good. I'm seeing some of the white oak acorns I'm seeing this year are some of the biggest ones I've ever seen.
Okay. What about when I say mast, how many is on a tree? How do we determine that, or can we aid in helping a tree with getting more acorns on it? I know probably weather and lack of rain and things like that is going to stress it to where it probably won't produce. Yeah. But is there an optimal?
So probably the numbers, I'd be guessing what the numbers per tree are. I've read about it, but I can't come up with those numbers off the top of my head. Sure. But the key thing for acorn or hickory nut production or walnut production really has to do with how healthy the tree is. Yeah. You know, trees are plants that need light. So if they've got a big healthy crown, they're going to have more surface area to produce those acorns on, and they're going to get more light, so they're going to have more energy to produce acorns. So what we want to do is try to produce big, healthy crowns. Okay. And those are going to be the trees that are going to grow faster too. But one of the tools we use is a thing called crop tree management, where we go out and find those oaks or the hickory trees. We look up at their crown, and if you look at them and they're real small crown or they're packed in there too tight, just getting rid of some of the competitors around them.
Just around it.
Thin the trees that are touching their canopy. We can get those crowns to expand.
Get it to grow more? Okay.
A good example of that, we were just at the Vinton Furnace. I was out there Monday, the state forest, with some Hocking College students. Okay. And there was a little black oak tree that in 2011 was 2.2 inches in diameter. So it was only about that big around. Right. We actually did a crop tree release.
Just on that one?
On that one, on several. Yeah. And then 5 years later, we did another release. That tree now, in 7 years, is 6.2 inches in diameter. Wow. So it's grown a bunch. Just because it's got a bigger crown, it's growing a lot faster. So going out and finding those trees, especially if you don't have a lot of them, giving them a little more space to grow can make a big difference on how many acorns they can produce and how fast they're going to grow. Okay.
And on a seedling, say if you're planting them, how long before they actually do produce an acorn? Is there there's different things, and when we plant in horticulture world, sometimes your first planting you may only get one or two. Or is it good to, if you're trying to manage it, do you go in and take off the acorns, or do you do anything? Or
acorn production, there's a lot of different oaks, and it varies. Some of them will produce a little sooner than others, like bur oak will produce in 10 or 15 years maybe. But on average in nature, you're probably talking 20 or 30 years if a tree's got plenty of light. Yeah. The tough part is we normally don't plant many oaks. We try to regenerate them naturally.
Let them fall and regenerate themselves.
So they have to hit the ground. We got to help create the light conditions that help them to grow well, because if they don't get those light conditions, they're going to get too shaded and probably not do well.
And that's where you're doing that selective management, the wood selective cutting, right?
Yeah, we've got to do proper cutting. It's different than most selective cutting in that we're leaving those oaks and those valuable trees to produce the acorns. Yep. And we're trying to get the right amount of light. We talk about oaks, I also use the analogy of Goldilocks. Okay. If it's too shady, like most of our selective cuts, you're going to get maple. Oh, okay. If it's too sunny, you're going to get tulip tree or yellow poplar and aspen and other things. So oak, you got to shoot for that middle ground.
I
You
didn't
got to
think of
get
it that
rid of
way.
those competitors.
Yeah.
And in nature, fire was the tool that did that. But
Yeah.
now we don't have a lot of fire in our ecosystem, so we
Right.
got to find ways to get rid of some of that competition to favor oaks. It's a challenge.
Gotcha.
It's a lot of work.
Huh, interesting. So, excuse me, I'm fighting a little cold as at the same time here. So we went from Buckeyes to acorns. What would be a next family, I guess, or is there any other families in the acorns that we would need to look at?
Some of the other hard mass things are hickories.
Okay.
So we've got some hickories out here, and hickories they vary a lot, but hickories have is this real bony, hard, kind of woody nut that's inside this husk. And a good cousin of the hickory is that. You guys know what that one is? That's the walnut.
That's a walnut, yeah.
So they're very close relatives. They're in the same family. But if you'll notice, all the hickories have these splits in their husks. So they'll want to split and peel apart naturally. Walnut won't have that split. So that's how you can separate them.
So those natural splits are like an orange or something.
Kind of. They'll
Kinda
just
like
actually want to peel naturally. The husk is really not of any value to wildlife. It just protects it while it's being produced, and then it'll peel off. The thing about the hickories and the walnuts is there aren't many species that can use them.
I don't see many. Yeah, I see a lot of those laying around. They don't eat a whole lot of those.
So if you look at this one as a kind of a clue on who might be able to eat them, you're pretty much talking about rodents.
Yeah.
So squirrels, chipmunks, even flying squirrels will eat them. But they're just so hard shelled that there aren't many wildlife that have that ability to break through that. Now I think a turkey could actually eat a whole, especially some of the smaller hickory nuts whole, and then use their gizzard to break them down.
Right.
But the hickory nuts have value, but especially mainly for those rodents, which the rodents are important because they're part of that food chain that feeds other things.
Gotcha.
And there's another one that's kind of different, and we lost our camera, I think, didn't we?
Well, yeah, we're having a little difficulty, but that's all right.
We'll keep. It's going to come back up?
Yeah, we keep rolling here. You may hear me moving around a little bit, but that's okay. This is live. This is the way it works. So now this is a little guy you got here.
Yeah, it's a tinier one.
Just a second, the camera will come in there.
I struggled a little bit finding these. I was out at Canner's Cave a while back, and these were all over the ground. These are little spiny husk, and then they've got these little tiny triangular-looking nuts inside them. Those are beech nuts.
Beech nuts. Okay.
It's one we don't think about for wildlife purposes, but they're very consistent producers.
Yeah.
Great for a lot of, especially the squirrels.
Yeah.
A lot of birds will eat them too.
Okay.
So beech nuts are another really good thing that we can manage for on the property.
Now, does those come off about the same time as these, or are they at a little different time as well?
Maybe just a little bit earlier, but they're definitely a fall type production, and it varies, but they're more consistent probably. Most years you're going to have some beech nuts.
Okay. Gotcha.
And a lot of times these will be quite a bit bigger with multiples of those fruits inside.
Inside of it. Okay.
But yeah, those are the main hard mass things that I can think of. The things that store well. They're high in fat.
Yeah.
So they're really valuable. Think about, you're out there in the winter, you don't have any protection other than your fur coat, and so they need that high fat content because they're burning a lot of energy just
trying to stay warm.
Trying to stay warm.
Yep. Stay warm and keep hunting food, I guess.
Yep.
And obviously, they're storing it away or trying to, as you see squirrels huddled in trees and things like that.
And what you'll find, especially with squirrels, you'll see populations bounce.
Yeah.
If you follow trends in populations, they're going to be a year or so behind when these acorns are being produced. So if you have a good acorn year, you're going to have a successful, more survival in the winter. Then they're going to have a lot more young the next year. So a lot of those populations really cycle with the acorn crops and the mast crops.
Absolutely right. Right in front of my house, I have this. I have some acorn trees and some walnut trees actually, and such, and I can watch the squirrels. When I see that we have a big crop of the mast, of the fruit, the nuts, it seems like the next year there's a ton of squirrels, and then all of a sudden there won't be a large nut population the next year, that fall or whatever.
It'll drop off.
And you'll notice that, or maybe it's on around the curve. You'll see more trees down that way that have them, and they move. They follow the nuts. It seems like so.
Yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah. So what are they eating now, Dave? Obviously.
So now, and through the summer, there's all kinds of stuff being produced. I was actually sitting in my yard watching some turkeys the other day.
Yeah.
And they were kind of flying up a couple feet in the air and then dropping back down to the ground. I'm like, what are they after? So I went out there and looked, and this thing's all beat up.
Right.
But that's a dogwood. That's flowering dogwood, and those little red fruits there, which they do pretty well. They hang on into the fall, but the wildlife, the turkey, will eat on those, and then of course our songbirds are pretty dependent on those too.
Yeah. Now those are soft, right?
They're pretty soft, pretty fleshy. They'll store fairly well as they dry, but they don't store near as well as this hard mast.
Now they don't probably fall off as much.
No, they do kind of hang on.
Yeah.
And then here's another one that hangs on.
Yeah.
This is one of our sumacs, and we've got several sumacs in Ohio. But I'll notice these fruits hanging on all winter long.
Yeah.
And then we'll get a snow cover, and you get in about February, and all of a sudden the songbirds will just pop in there because they've ran out of everything else to eat. They've eaten all the grapes that are out there hanging on the vine still, and then they'll go to whatever they can find next. So even sumac, you don't think of it as being that valuable for wildlife, but it's out there. One of the most important fleshy fruits out there is grape.
Yeah.
You got vines out there naturally in the woods. It's amazing how a lot of songbirds will use the bark. They'll peel the bark off the grape to make their nest.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it's another one. Now grapevines, if you get too many and they're growing over your trees, you've got some problems. So you got to manage
your tree, right.
But if it's on trees that aren't so valuable for you, grape's really good.
Okay.
I was looking for another one, black gum. It's a real common tree that a lot of people don't know, but it's a little bluish black fruit.
Okay.
And they're pretty high in fat that are usually available about a little bit earlier now or about now. But I think they're pretty much gone for the year.
Yeah. Now, Dave, we're doing a little research here at the center on pawpaw trees. Where would a pawpaw fruit fall in?
Pawpaw would be a soft mast, usually early fall, late summer is when they come in. They are high demand. The species that like them, they're really hard and green, and then as soon as they start to ripen, it'll draw in especially raccoons, possums, and they'll go pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Another one that's very similar to that is persimmon. If you're a deer hunter right now, as soon as we get this cold weather and that first frost, those persimmons are going to start hitting the ground, and I'm seeing a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
So persimmons are another one. It's a fleshy fruit. It's very perishable, but they're very fragrant, and they'll draw the wildlife in.
Yeah.
So that's another one you want to look for out there. They also taste pretty good if you catch them. You don't want to eat them before the first frost.
Yeah.
You don't want to eat them when they're still firm like this. If we could get Pat out from behind the camera, I'd like to just put one of these in his mouth and watch his face pucker up a little bit because they're pretty. They'll make your mouth go numb almost like you've been to the dentist.
Yeah. Now, we have one here that's got color on it, and then we have one that's still bright green, or to a degree, as you see. Yeah. So there's a big difference in what would that be? Is that weather related, or is this just some leftover?
I don't know if one was just pollinated a little later, running a little later, but they're getting close, but they're still just too firm. You want to be able to squeeze them, and they're going to be real soft.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. Mother Nature provides a lot of that diversity out there.
Yep.
If you don't have a lot of diversity in your woods, you can plant some of this stuff.
Yep.
It takes a long time. It's a big investment. There are even a couple shrubs. There's one called hazelnut that'll grow along the edges of woods that produces, they call them filberts at Christmas time. You'll buy mixed nuts, but the native hazelnuts are really good for hard mass production, and you can get those things turned around in maybe 5 years or so.
Okay.
So you can manage your edges and plant some of that stuff, or a lot of times they're there if you really look.
Okay. So is there any other trees, Dave, that maybe produce fruit that we don't see animals eat?
You know, there's definitely things more preferred than others, but even the seeds out of a pine cone. I mean, I sit in a tree stand and I'll look around, and one of my favorite things when I'm in that tree stand, a little songbird called a gold crown kinglet will come, and he's got this big gold patch on his head. Why is he there? Well, he's eating the little seeds out of the pine cone.
Out of the pine cone. And we don't even think that there's seeds in there, really. I mean, you don't think about that.
Or that sweet gum ball that you see hanging there, it's got little seeds in, and at a certain time of year, you'll see the finches all come in and start eating those. So pretty much every type of tree out there produces fruit, and almost everything is eaten. You know, you think of the maple fruits. When I was in my teens hunting in the hills, if it was early before the acorns are ready, you would find squirrels eating those. You'd find them eating those little cones on yellow poplar. They look like a seed cone, but they're green. They'll chew on those. So, you know, having that diversity, having that variety out there is really important for wildlife. Almost all of it gets consumed at some point in time.
At some point in time. But now, you were talking about the, what was it, a bird that may strip the grape down and make their nest and such. Is there any other type of a vine that they would do that to, or I've seen deer, you know, strip bark off trees. They eat that, or are they just using their, you know, sharpening their horn antlers?
If deer or rabbits are eating bark off trees, that means they don't have other things to eat. And when you run out of acorns, you get late in the winter, they're going to eat twigs. They're going to eat whatever they can to survive. Not as high as nutrition, so you know, they're going to have to eat constantly.
To eat more.
But there are lots of, even poison ivy. You don't think of it, but the little white fruits on poison ivy, I'll see songbirds coming in and eating those.
Oh my gosh! I wouldn't. That stuff makes me.
So you know. Lots of things out there. There's diversity out there for reasons, because everything doesn't produce every year. And when we have these bumper years, these are the years that there's some of the acorns don't get eaten, and then we have enough left over to do the sprouting, like we were talking about earlier, where they're gonna be able to sprout and produce that next white oak that's gonna be out there.
And we didn't even cover some of the earlier stuff. You know, what about the raspberries and blackberries and things like that are the wild ones that are out there? Those obviously will get just plucked right before or as they get ripe.
And those tend to be in our younger forests. So if we have some young forests, we have more of those berry things like blackberries and raspberries. So we want to maintain some of that young forest too, so we have that variety.
Okay. Well, Dave, we're about out of time. I love this. This is great. This is great. You know, getting this stuff out and looking at it and trying to educate everybody about the different fruit, the mast, if you would, for a new word for a lot of people.
So the new thing is, you think of Brutus Buckeye as being the Ohio State mascot. So the way to learn that and remember it, he's now the mascot.
There you go.
Because he's the only tree nut that I know of that's a mascot.
There you go. So until next month, we'll be a little colder. We'll be talking about probably a little more winter activities. So
sounds good.
Everybody stay tuned. We'll see you next month.
All right. Take care.